Hi, my name is Dr. Erin Walborn, and I am an audiologist who specializes in the management of tinnitus. I am a qualified teacher of mindfulness-based stress reduction. I also have advanced training in mind-body medicine, and I'm a board member and secretary of the American Tinnitus Association. I have been working with patients who have both hearing loss and tinnitus for over 30 years, and they also teach these mind body techniques on the side. So, thank you for joining me today. Today, I'd like to share with you how mind body practices, and namely mindfulness, which is a component of mind body, can influence our health. So, this is the physiology, the biological underpinnings of our nervous system. So I want you to know that we are born with our brainstem and our limbic system wired for survival. This is evolutionary, right? Our nervous system, brain, and our spinal cord, and some cranial nerves and spinal nerves, but also this autonomic nervous system. That's this unconscious part of our body that controls things like our heartbeat, our blood pressure, our digestion, our sweating, and we also have the both two branches of that. One that we call parasympathetic, which is rest and digest, and the sympathetic, which is being active and alert, or some people call it fight or flight. The one branch we're not going to talk much about right now or today is called the somatic nervous system, and that's using our voluntary skeletal muscles. And so there are some definite practices that you can do with your muscles to promote relaxation, but today we're focusing on how the autonomic nervous system is being regulated and how mindfulness practices can influence that. So, as far as evolution goes, 500 million years ago, we had the dorsal vagal part of our parasympathetic. This is that life threat, that system of immobilization. So, think tortoise, right? What happened when a tortoise sensed there was threat or danger? It would disappear. It would, squeeze, go into its shell and just sit there until it sensed that the danger had passed. And then it would come out and move on. Well, then we evolved to have a sympathetic portion of the nervous system, and that was 400 million years ago. And in this adaptive protection, we did it through action, right? This is where you'd either escape or you would run away or be aggressive, all right? 200 million years ago, we evolved with this ventral vagus part of our nervous system, and that's up in the heart area. And this is that sense of safety. And this is where we use connection with other people, being able to talk things out instead of just having to run away. So, this is the evolution of our nervous systems. And we can thank Claude Bernard, who was a 19th century French physician, who he coined the term homeostasis, and he recognized and saw that the body had this capacity to maintain a stable internal environment in the midst of a continually changing external world. And that was in 1865. And in 1932, Walter Cannon, another physiologist, he noticed this response to stress. And he saw in all vertebrates, from fish to cats to humans, had this arousal and preparation to flee or to combat a threat, right? So we've known about our body's capacity to keep this homeostasis for quite some time. So what's actually going on in it? Let's look at that. This autonomic nervous system, we tend to think of it as being unconscious, right? We say that it takes care of basic housekeeping responsibilities like moving our heart rate, our blood pressure, our digestion, and we don't control that. We don't pay attention to what's going on in our bodies for that. And to the two branches of that autonomic nervous system, we have the sympathetic, which is mobility action, right? We call it the gas pedal at times. And then we have that parasympathetic that we talked about before, and that's that rest and digest. And then we have that dorsal, the older part of our vagus nerve, that's that emergency brake. And then we have this ventral vagal, which we consider just like the handbrake of a car. I'll explain that a little bit later. So this is what it looks like in our body, right? We have these three systems. And this newest system is that's where our social engagement comes in, right? So instead of starting a war and fighting and running or collapsing, we have this ability to engage, to feel safe, and have connection with other people. So we do have this beautiful built-in system to adapt to our needs. So our bodies are sensing, is there danger present? In this case, we have this saber-toothed tiger, and this built-in adaptive response automatically raises the heart rate, increases blood pressure, sweating increases. What else happens? Digestion slows down. Blood is shunted away from the skin to these large muscle groups to help us fight. Pupils dilate so we can see the threat better. How is our body doing this? So the nervous system is using this term. Stephen Porges termed it neuroception. It's our internal surveillance. And it works like this. First, your nervous system looks inside of you and senses what's going on. What is your heart rate doing right now? How's your breath? How's your digestion? And the list goes on. So it's looking inside of you to decide, am I safe? It's looking outside of you to determine, are you safe? And this uses your five senses, right? Sight, sound, smell, texture, taste, all these things. Sometimes we can sense danger before we actually can see danger. And the body can respond accordingly. And then it can also sense between nervous systems. So without saying a word and you're sitting across from someone, you can kind of get a feel of if they're friend or foe, right? So when we have this sense, this neuroception, and we sense that we're not safe, these are the typical ways that an animal responded in nature. If it was the fight response, you might be aggressive towards other people or animals. If it was the flight response, animal might run away or avoid others. If it's the freeze response, it's that playing dead. And if it's the fawn response, it's that submissive behavior, right? Like rolling onto your back, okay? So the autonomic nervous system senses your environment, and the healthy version with the sympathetic, it's that gas pedal. It mobilizes the body for action. If it's too much, there's too much sympathetic energy going on where it's in excess, right? You can become defensive. That's that fight or flight response. We need a little bit of this sympathetic to get us going every day, to get us out there and moving and talking and having this talk for you right now. I had to engage my sympathetic nervous system. It increases breathing and it gives a little cortisol boost, a little adrenaline boost, right? And when you're in that mode, you might notice you have colder hands and colder feet. Now, in the opposite, this brake pedal, this is that parasympathetic where we maintain equilibrium, right? So after this talk, I might just go have a cup of tea and sit and relax and allow my system to kind of calm down a little bit. My breathing may slow down then, right? I might have some good endorphins going through me. And then my hands might warm up and my feet might warm up. We have a balance of this system. And so what happens, especially in the day of the saber-toothed tiger, let's stick to that example for a minute. Our body perceived a threat, okay? And then we evaluated the threat and said, what do we do? What do we need to do? Can we run away? Do we need to just stay here and fawn death? What do we have to do? And then the threat's over. Somehow it ended, right? The saber-toothed tiger got distracted and ran away, or we ran and got out of harm's way. Once the threat is over, the stress cycle goes back to homeostasis. The body goes back into that parasympathetic. It can rest, it can relax, it can heal until the next threat is detected. This is how stress cycles occurred, especially way back in the past with these immediate threats, right? So this is what it looks like when we have the the relaxation response, the blood pressure goes down, the heart rate returns to normal. We have better focus again. And then you can see like what it looks like when we're in that fight or flight response. We need a balance of these two systems to be healthy. And this balance is that homeostasis that Dr. Claude was talking about before. But what does it look like in this day and age with the stressors that we have going on in our world today? Sometimes we can't always get away from them, right? So let's look at what are some examples of different stressors. Well, there's acute stress, which is short term. And then there's chronic stress that's typically 21 days or longer. So short term stress could be things like this presentation I'm giving you right now. Did cause me a little bit of stress, especially how to record it, right? It might be a short-term stress might be a recent argument that you had with a coworker or a friend or your spouse. It can even be running late or getting stuck in traffic. Think about think about the people with road rage, how you feel when you just have to get somewhere and traffic is like, oh, I can't get there, right? Now think about chronic stress, a bad relationship, a stressful job. Maybe it's taking care of elderly parents. Perhaps it's the political environment that we are in today, right? Some of these stressors we don't have any control over, but yet our bodies feel it. And so this is where ongoing health problems can occur, where there's chronic stress. So I'm going to take you down that path and show you how that happens in our nervous system. Sources of stress, right? Big life events. Now, what's important to know is not all stress is bad for us. Some stress is what we call eustress or positive stress. And that could be getting married or having a baby, right? These are stressful events that are positive, but they're still putting stress or physiologic changes within our body. And then there's some negative stressors, right? The death of a spouse, being fired from work, even retirement can be good and or bad, right? You might have this newfound freedom, but not know what to do with it. Or you might have this newfound freedom and be like, oh gosh, I don't have as much money as I once did. I can't live the life I used to live and still have money to continue to live, right? And then we have these daily hassles. What do those look like? Too many things to do. I can relate to that. Wasting time. How many of us just scroll on our social media to waste time? And then time flies by. You don't know where it all went, right? The rising cost of common goods, home maintenance, our own physical appearance, right? Misplacing things. I'm constantly misplacing my phone. And yes, that is a stressful event. So the point of this slide is to recognize that there are some things we can change. Like we can choose not to scroll through our social media and waste time if we have things that we want to do. And we can also realize that not all stress is negative stress or bad stress. There are positive things that can also cause our bodies to have a physiologic change within it to try to cope with that event. We also want to look at what we call ACEs, right? Adverse childhood experiences. And this is past traumas. And so trauma can occur at any age, but we do find that when trauma occurs in early life, it can kind of reshape the nervous system at an early age. So things like abuse or neglect, being a victim of crime, migration, asylum, or ending a relationship, any adjustment period, right? Prejudice, household or family adversity, inhumane treatment, adult responsibilities occurring at a very young age, or even child labor, and bereavement, having a traumatic death happen, or surviving an illness or an accident. So, one thing we want to look at with that is how do our thoughts play a role? So imagine I stuck you here in this beautiful environment and your body, your neuroception is looking outside of you. Okay, so it looks outside of you and And for some of you might say, wow, that's a beautiful place. I'm very happy right now. I'm very calm. Okay. I've had some patients tell me, oh, that doesn't feel safe. I feel trapped. I have no way out. Right. That's that outside looking. And that stems from past histories of trauma or not as well. But it's also looking inside, what's going on inside your body. So as you sit there, and many of you may notice that your mind wanders, yeah, and that you have these thoughts. And so it's recognizing your thought patterns, right? If you're in the past and you're ruminating about something that happened in the past, your body doesn't know the difference that it's not occurring right now. And so it is going to respond in that fight or flight. You may be thinking about the future, maybe about an upcoming surgery or future plans, right? Again, the body doesn't know the difference. So it could be a real stressful event or threat, or it could be a perceived stressful event or threat. And your body will respond the same with that fight or flight response or freeze or fawn, right? If you are in the present moment, or you can get your body into that present moment, into a mindfulness state for a period of time, it's impossible to maintain that state, nor do we want to maintain that state. But if to get your body into that parasympathetic part of your nervous system, you can do that through these mind body or mindfulness skills that we're going to talk about. And that can help put your body back into that rest or digest portion of your autonomic nervous system where your body can self heal and repair itself. When you've had trauma in your past or a lot of stress, chronic stress, the nervous system becomes a little bit more intense, more hyper vigilant. Okay. And what does that look like? That looks like your nervous system might constantly be scanning the environment. You might be irritable or quick to anger. You could have a lot of difficulty with concentrating and focus. You might feel unsafe, even in familiar places. You could easily be startled by noises or movement. You might feel on edge all the time or restless. You might have trouble falling asleep or staying asleep. And you could read into other people's tone or body language and assume that they meant something that maybe really wasn't there. So, one of this autonomic hierarchy of that nervous system was if you feel into your own body, if you feel that you are trapped and you are in a cycle of endless challenges with a no way out, maybe you go through the motions of the day, but you have no energy, a loss of hope, a disconnect. Some even call it a disassociation, right? The shutdown. This is where we're stuck we're frozen in this dorsal vagal portion of our autonomic nervous system. That's like that tortoise, right? We're stuck there. We're having a hard time shifting ourselves back out of it. Okay. The sympathetic portion of our nervous system, when it's in excess, is when we feel that things are overwhelming and there's a series of never ending challenges. It just is not getting easier. And we lose our sense of feeling safe in that moment. And what do? We react by either attacking or escaping and feel that we just can't get rid of or escape that chaotic energy. And that would be kind of like a shark attacking a fish, where the fish were always being attacked, right? And so this is that when the sympathetic portion is stuck and you're in this phase and you're not able to get back out of it easily. Okay. And then the ventral vagal, the newest part of our nervous system, is that feeling of safety and connection with other people. And that is the pathway to healing and health and well being. This is where life feels manageable, right? Going with the flow and you feel socially connected. And this is where, when we're in a healthy phase, we can move up and down. We can move into the sympathetic or dorsal vagal, but we can easily move back out of them. So what we're talking about here is identifying maybe where do you feel that you are? Are you able to move in and out? Or do you feel like you're associated with more with one of these areas than another? It's awareness practice, really, right? And what does that look like if we're stuck, right? And if we've had trauma responses? What does that look like for humans is that if you've had some chronic stressors throughout your early life and even now, you might feel that you're stuck in that fight portion. And that could be you feel reactive or defensive or aggressive or easily threatened, right? If you are identify more in that flight response, you might feel that you have more anxiety and fear and panic. This perfectionism, I tend to feel that perfectionism myself sometimes, right? Chronic worry. The freeze response is feeling stuck, immobilized, spacing out, maybe disassociating. And the fawn response is that people pleasing, avoiding conflict, lack of boundaries, loss of your own identity, and difficulty saying no. And so some of these are habitual patterns that may have emerged early on in our lives to survive, right? Because our nervous system wants us to survive. And so this is somehow some ways that we learned how to survive in our own environments. Sele, a scientist, actually studied this and found that under chronic stress that homeostasis levels change, right? So he put animals, humans, he did studies on both animals, vertebrates, and humans, and found that putting them under chronic stress, at first the body went into the alarm phase, right? And then when the stressor stayed for a long period of time and it couldn't adapt, it started to change its physiology to try and resist against the stress. And then it could only resist for so long. If the stressor kept on going, went to exhaustion. The body couldn't do it. It burnt out. And so it found that there were actual physiologic changes within the body to chronic stress. And we have these higher levels now of our baseline. Instead of the baseline being this rest and digest, we tend to take on that feeling of that agitation as our new baseline. It's our new resting state, right? And so, what were the changes that he saw? And these changes have also been shown through MRI, functional MRI. So there are a number of studies done on this that when people are under chronic stress, the amygdala, which is responsible for that memory emotion, and then sending signals to the hypothalamus to release cortisol, right? This cortisol is now released out of our adrenal glands that sit on top of our kidneys, and it goes through our bloodstream. And so you have these corticosteroids that are constantly coursing through our bloodstream. And that over a prolonged period of time actually makes the amygdala grow bigger, more reactive. So things that typically you wouldn't feel were dangerous now begin to feel more dangerous. And the prefrontal cortex, this portion of the brain that makes us human, that's responsible for reasoning and thinking, that shrinks under chronic stress. And so we feel on edge all the time, but can't figure it out and can't reason our way out, right? And so studies have also shown, this is the beautiful part, that the brain is very neuroplastic and that it can change through meditation and mindfulness techniques, that the amygdala can shrink back down and the prefrontal cortex can actually grow bigger and have more reasoning and more focus and more concentration. There is so much evidence-based information out there these days on how stress affects the body. It literally affects every part of our body. When we have that cortisol coursing through our bloodstream, remember, it goes to every organ in our body. And then we can see the effects of that on the screen for different organs and body parts. And this also includes ringing in the ears or sound sensitivity. Stress, as many of us know, can just go louder and make us more sensitive to everyday sounds that don't bother other people. So, the practices of mind body medicine, we've actually found that in the past 50 years, so we used to believe that the autonomic nervous system was totally unconscious, beyond our control, right? It controls our breathing, our digestion, as we already talked about. It's that adaptive strategy that prepares us to run or fight, right? But we have learned over the past 50 years that there are things, there are some activities and things that we can do to exert control over our autonomic nervous system. And so some of these mind body practices include mindfulness meditation. That is one big one that has been evidence based. Belief since the 70s. John Kabat-Zinn started doing he started the mindfulness based stress reduction program, actually. And that's where all the evidence comes from around mindfulness based practices. But so some of these practices are body scans and guided imagery. Mindfulness meditation is awareness practices, right? Other things that can help regulate the nervous system are being with other like-minded, safe people, dancing, singing, chanting. That all helps work and activate that ventral vagal part of our autonomic nervous system. There's a really great practice out there called the shaking practice. And so what this is literally is shaking, shake, shake, shake for a good 2 to 3 minutes, and then stop and feel what your body feels. So the theory behind the shaking practice, and this is true, animals in the wild, let's think back of the saber-toothed tiger attacking like a fawn, okay? They probably didn't live at the same time, but that's okay. The fawn tried to run away, maybe realized it couldn't run away, so it played dead, right? And then something distracted this saber-toothed tiger and it ran away. You can actually see a video of this on YouTube. The fawn will lie there and continue to lie there for a period of time until its internal neuroception senses, I don't sense, I don't hear, I don't smell, I don't see any danger. I feel I'm now in a safe place. So you will see the fawn shaking, 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 shaking. And then all of a sudden, after a couple of minutes, it jumps up and it runs away and it's now reached homeostasis. So with animals, they don't hold on to the thought pattern of that trauma, right? They shake off the trauma and they move on. With humans, we tend to store that trauma in our body and we tend to go back and think about the trauma or worry that it's going to happen again in the future. And so shaking can also release some of that excessive cortisol that we built up from the trauma or thinking about the trauma and get it back out of our bodies. Another mind body technique that can be used is that self hug, right? If you don't have another human being that you are near, that you feel safe with, that you love, you can hug yourself and feel that connection to yourself. And you can do self massage, just running your hand up and over your arms. And that can help regulate your nervous system. Another great practice that I love is laughing. So if you aren't around anyone that makes you laugh, watch a sitcom that makes you laugh. Or there's actually a laughing practice where you literally just start laughing and you will find it's a little canned at first, but after a while, you really start to just laugh. It just gets it going. And that really also works that ventral vagal part of our nervous system to engage it. And another really great practice is breathing practices. So one I'll just share briefly is if you breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth, like you're trying to blow out a candle. So as you breathe in, you're breathing in from, let's say, maybe the count of 4. So breathe in, hold your breath for a second, and now breathe out for maybe the count of 6 out your mouth. And then you would repeat. You could also add in a little mantra to that breath. Maybe it's as you breathe in, you think the word soft and you take a deeper breath as you breathe in, thinking the word soft. And as you breathe out, thinking the word belly, soft belly. And what you're doing as you are breathing in this manner, and you're literally thinking those words, you're consciously trying to relax your body. And that is shifting from that fight or flight response into the parasympathetic response. So there is some control that we now have, that we know of, that literally can help take a traumatized nervous system and help it get into the healing phase, that parasympathetic portion of our nervous system. And so I think this is the key, right? Life these days, sometimes the stress doesn't end. We don't actually complete the stress cycle because it's not the saber-toothed tiger who just ran away, right? Sometimes it's what we've already talked about, politics and socioeconomic status, and some of these things we don't have any control over. But how do we complete the stress cycle for ourselves? It's having tools in our toolbox to help our bodies find a way, and we communicate to our body that it's safe and it has survived the stressful situation. So it's getting out of our thoughts, coming back into the present moment, engaging in some of these present moment activities, these mind body practices we just talked about. There's many more out there. And teaching the body how to shift it off for a period of time so the body can heal. When our bodies feel that it's safe, it can then easily move up and down through these same three systems, right? So when we feel safe and our nervous systems are regulated, it's easy to go up and down. So we can go from feeling engaged and thriving and social to needing to take a time out, a step back, right? When I'm too social for too long, I need to come back. I need to sit and just rest, be calm, maybe even go into a meditation. Sleep is great for that parasympathetic, that dorsal vagal, right? The opposite, right? When we're stuck in that area, that's when we feel that disassociation because we're trapped there, right? But if we're able to regulate our nervous system and move up and down this ladder, we're going to feel much more engaged with life in a way that is healthier. And you may find that your body is healing in ways that you never thought that it could. So, what are the benefits of mindfulness practices, or on a larger scale, mind body practices? It's both physical and mental, right? Physical, it can boost your energy levels, improve sleep, it can reduce chronic pain, it can improve heart function, and it can help with digestive problems. This has been researched over and over. They actually found that the taking a mindfulness-based stress reduction class, which is 8 weeks, and it's 2.5 hours every week of just attending the class and then an hour of homework every day, found that that class was just as effective as taking Lexapro to treat depression. Mental benefits of mindfulness practices: it can relieve stress, it can reduce anxiety, it can improve your mood and happiness, it can make you feel lighter, it can boost your concentration and focus. We saw that in the neuroplasticity in the brain, right? And it can improve your self esteem. So there's lots of different benefits from mindfulness practices. The thing to know is that because there are techniques now that can balance, that we can actually do to balance our fight or flight and our rest or digest, right? That create these physiologic changes in our body that can promote healing. If you are taking medication for like high blood pressure, diabetes, or even irritable bowel or anything like that, and you start these mindfulness practices that are having healthy benefits, you might need your doctor to monitor your medications because you may find you need to lessen the dosage that you're taking. Very important to know, and talk to your doctor if you do decide to take up a mindfulness practice. So, tools and resources for finding different practices and things. There's no one right way. Honestly, you will know yourself better. You will know what you're feeling. The biggest thing is having an intention. Why? Why do you want to take up a mindfulness practice? Right? Having that intention will really help sustain you and keep it going. And then having the attention of how am I going to do this? What are my resources? There's apps. There's lots of free apps out there. There's lots of classes out there. There's lots of resources. Many of them are free. Some of them are not, right? The Center for Mind Body Medicine on their website, they have resources available for free. There's some guided meditations on there, but there's lots of places where you can get this information from. The biggest, well, and the last one, sorry, I want to make sure I say this, is your attitude around it, because this is the way. And the attitude, by that, I mean your attitude toward yourself, being kind to yourself, being compassionate toward yourself, right? When we take up a mindfulness practice, sometimes it doesn't go the way we want it to. And I have a lot of people who say, I can't meditate. I just can't sustain my attention that long. And the one thing about mindfulness meditation, and that's not the only way, right? We talked about so many other ways. But the one thing about mindfulness meditation is a lot of people, I think that they have to stop their thoughts, that they're going to become in this Zen-like moment and have no thoughts and reach some distant state, right? And that is just not true, because you're human. And as humans, we think, right? We need to think, right? So if you are deciding to practice even a breathing meditation and you notice that your thoughts, you catch yourself with your mind wandering, it's okay. It's okay. Just say, my mind wandered. Okay, let's come back to my breath. Back to breathing in, back to breathing out. And every time your mind wanders, it's okay, because you're aware that it was wandering and you're bringing it back, right? So it's that kindness toward yourself, not beating yourself up if your mind wanders. You think, oh, I can't do it. No, being kind. So I want to thank you for joining me in this presentation. I do hope that you found it beneficial and helpful. And I do hope that as you begin to practice, you notice that some beneficial changes are occurring in your body. Thank you so much.